Welcome, everybody, and I'd like to welcome you to our inaugural Apps Power Hour. We're so glad to have you joining us today. I hope everybody's been enjoying the holidays. We got New Year's coming up. I don't know if anybody's got any great plans for that, but I know I had a white Christmas, so I don't know about the rest of you. I am up here actually in Dillon, Colorado. My family's skiing in Keystone today while I'm joining you for this wonderful webinar. So today we're going to be talking about the intro to QuickBooks, the online ecosystem. And we've got Heather Satterley joining us. So I'm very glad to have her joining us today. So first of all, we're going to talk a little bit about the QB Power Hour and your host. And we'll talk about the CPE process. We'll thank our sponsors. And then the main part of our webinar today is our intro to the QuickBooks Online ecosystem. We're going to help you understand how the apps sync with QuickBooks and with each other, help you identify different types of apps that work with QuickBooks, when an app is a good solution for a workflow, how to evaluate and select apps, and then also some best practices for implementing apps. So even if you're already working with apps, I think you're sure there's going to be something that you'll learn today. So our QB Power Hour webinar series, which we're now integrating Apps Power Hour with QB Power Hour. The plan is to kind of alternate. So we'll have a QuickBooks Power Hour, and then the next time, usually every other Thursday, the next one, then we'll do an Apps Power Hour. So upcoming, we're going to be talking about desktop payroll on January 11th, and then at the Apps Power Hour, we're going to talk about app stacking, putting multiple apps together and things. So normally with the QuickBooks Power Hours, we talk about different tips, tricks, and advanced insights. Desktop and online. We'll be talking today about apps that integrate with desktop and online. And then sometimes we have special guests that will join us from some of these third-party apps, practice management or pricing or things like that. My name is Michelle Long. I'm the owner of Long for Success. I've been a trainer for Intuit for 10 years now. I can't believe that. Author of 5 different books. Check those out on Amazon if you're interested. And that's enough about me. Hector Garcia, my partner for QB Power Hour, it's his birthday today. Happy birthday, Hector. So he is enjoying time with his family and some time off this week. So he is not joining us today. But we do have my new co-host with the Apps Power Hour, Heather Satterley. Heather, you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. This is Heather Satterley. Michelle, thanks so much for having me on today. I'm so excited about today's session. We have been working hard to put this together for you guys, so it's really exciting to be starting it up today. So if you don't know me, I'm sure I know lots of you, but if you don't know me, I have a firm in Rhode Island called Satterley Training and Consulting. I've been a pro advisor since the 90s. And love all things QuickBooks and Intuit. So super excited to be talking with you guys about apps today. Apps are one of my favorite things ever. In fact, you could say, I am a bit of an appaholic. Love my apps. Do love that. So really excited to be with you guys today.
That's fun. I'm going to go ahead and launch our first poll question. Just let us know which one of these best describes you. And while you're doing that, I just want to say, yes, I am so excited to be working with Heather on this because she is an appaholic. I'll attest to that. But it's just great because we found I love training with Heather. We have a great time whenever we're doing the certification training or whatever it is. And Heather does really love the apps. And what she and I and other trainers have seen is that a lot of people have a lot of questions about working with apps or specific apps. They want more details. They want to know more about it. And so I'm really glad to be doing the Apps Power Hour with Heather and I. Like she said, we're just getting started, so we're still working on, the logo, the website, the Facebook page, and all that stuff. But we're very glad to have you guys joining us for this. Okay, so I'm going to give you guys like 5 more seconds. If you need CPE credits, you need to be answering these poll questions. So please answer that poll question if you need your CPE credits. Heather, you want to add anything that I was just rambling on about?
No, I think we're good. So excited to get started.
All right. Okay, last call on the poll. I'm going to close it in 3, 2, 1. And 86% of you are an accounting professional and 9% accounting professional employed privately. And then we had a little bit other ones out there. So very good. Very glad to have you guys all joining us today. So for CPE, so if you need continuing professional education credits, like for CPAs or certified bookkeepers or something, you must be attending this live, not listening to the recording. You must be logged in at least 50 minutes. We're going to give you 5 polling questions today. You only have to answer 3. Okay, so you only need to answer 3 of those. Your CPE certificate will be emailed in about 3 weeks. This episode is not an ACE approved webinar. Some of them are. Today is not ACE approved. All CPE certificates up to December 7th have been emailed. Hector takes care of all that and he does a wonderful job. So you should have gotten all of those already. Upcoming events, real quickly to remind you, Hector Garcia is doing video marketing for accountants strategies for 2018. That is on Friday. And then right after Hector's on Friday, you can join Heather. She's going to have a Zapier 5-week workshop. She's going to be going in depth. You're going to learn more about Zapier today. It is amazing. And Heather's going to tell you about that. She's doing a special 5-week workshop and space is limited. So she can really, talk to people individually and answer their questions and things. So you've got the URL for that. And then Scaling New Heights is coming up in June. This is in Atlanta this year. And QuickBooks Connect in San Jose in November. Those are both amazing conferences. So as you're planning next year, you might consider attending both of those. And we'd like to ask you to help with the Intuit Average Billing Rate Survey. I've been working on this for many years, and this year Heather's helping me with this, and we've got 2 surveys. One for the Intuit Rate Survey, where we can see the billing practices of each other and kind of see what other accounting professionals are doing on their billing rates or billing practices and things like that. And then we also have an app survey. Both of those surveys only take a few minutes to go through them, like about 10 minutes or less. So I would encourage you to do that after today's webinar, okay? We don't want you to do it now, but after today's webinar. I want to thank our sponsors. We've got T-Sheets, the absolute best app, and it's now an Intuit-owned company. #1 rated app at apps.com helps you to create, manage, and approve your timesheets from any device. It's incredible. Arrow Workflow, created by other pro advisors and accounting professionals like you all, helps you track your workflow, your tasks, your due dates, get all kinds of reports and things like that. It's amazing as well. And then HubDoc, it's an awesome document aggregator. It pulls all these documents together, including, bills from various vendors, or it can actually fetch bank statements or credit card statements. So it's a huge time saver as well. So we really want to thank all of our sponsors for allowing us to have this free for you all. So I'm going to talk briefly about the benefit of apps, and then we're going to let Heather take over, and she's going to talk a lot more detail about apps. So first of all, why do we need apps to integrate with QuickBooks? It really helps to expand and enhance the features and functionalities of QuickBooks. For example, maybe you've got somebody that's a plumber or an electrician and they're out in the field and they need help doing scheduling of jobs. You've got an app for that. If you need robust inventory, there's an app for that. So it really can help expand QuickBooks, the capabilities, and customize it for the particular needs of specific clients based on their industry or just based on what they need. It allows us to reduce data entry so people aren't out in the field entering something and then you can come back in the office and enter it again. You can automatically update these things, import only when you need to. So you may want to import the data once a day or once a week. And you can also use them for user permissions. Let's say you don't want any of the salespeople having access to QuickBooks. You can just give them access to an invoicing app or the inventory. The people in the warehouse only have access to an inventory app instead of all of QuickBooks. So there's a lot of need for these apps, and it really helps expand the capabilities of QuickBooks. But I know what a lot of you are thinking, wait a minute, if I'm paying for QuickBooks, now I have to pay for all these apps. My clients aren't going to want to pay for that. It's too expensive, right? How many of you think of that, right? If I tack on, 2, 3, 4 apps here, it's getting pretty expensive. Well, the thing I like to challenge people and get people to realize and think about, how many of you prepare taxes? I would venture a guess over 50% of you prepare taxes, right? So how many of you use software to prepare your taxes? Probably everybody, right? So why wouldn't you, theoretically, if you could, I know the IRS says that you have to e-file and all that, but theoretically, if you could, why would you not get the PDFs from irs.gov and manually fill out the tax return, make your copies, and send it in? Because that's free, right? Why wouldn't you do it manually and paper file the returns? People laugh and they're like, oh my God, that's absurd. No, we always use tax prep software because it allows you to do more tax returns, make more money, and be more profitable, right? So your tax software is a tool that allows you to make more money and get more returns done and be more efficient and more profitable. That's the way it is with any of these apps. It allows people to be more efficient and ultimately more profitable. And if you do the research, you can even find that small businesses and businesses that invest in technology are ultimately more profitable. So it really does help. So I think a lot of us need to get over the cost and the price aspect of things, build that into your fees for your clients, and that'll help alleviate any of the pushback that you might get. Heather, do you want to go ahead and take control? And I'm going to go ahead and launch the next poll question.
Sure, absolutely. All right, so let me get my screen sharing for you. You're going to go ahead and hand things over to me, right, Michelle?
Yes.
Or should I go ahead and do that? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'm going to show my screen. So if everybody could let me know if they can see my screen, that would be great. If you could just type into the question box, question panel, let me know that you can see it. Okay, perfect.
All right,
very good.
Heather, I'm going to launch a poll real quick.
Okay, sure.
And so then let you take over, so I don't have to stop you for a while.
Okay, perfect.
So Heather, while we're doing this poll question, we're asking people if they use apps for their own practice. Let me ask you, Heather, what is your thoughts on the cost and things? What do you hear from clients or people surrounding the cost of apps?
So what I hear about the cost of apps is, and we're going to talk a little bit about this later, is that typically when we are, employing an app and using an app, it's to free up our time and free up our quality of life and the way we run our business, right? So you certainly have to take that cost into account, but you also have to understand, the value of the amount of time that you're going to be saving by using the app. So, depending on how you're running your practice, if I'm working with a client and the app is part of my job, so it's the way that I'm either getting documents for my clients, maybe using HubDoc, or I'm sharing documents with my clients using ShareFile or something like that, those types of apps, I consider those an overhead cost for my firm because it saves me an enormous amount of time when I'm collaborating with my clients and my team members. Sometimes I have clients that use an app that's specific for their business and it really doesn't have anything to do with me. Those apps typically my client's going to pay for. So when you're thinking about your pricing as a firm and as a pro advisor, you've got to think about, where's the value lying? Is the value lying with you on your lap and it's making your job a lot easier, or is this app specific to that client's needs? And that's going to kind of help to guide you on, A, what's the cost, right? And also B, how are you going to, work out who's going to pay for the app, right? Because I think that's an important thing too, is deciding when you're implementing it, deciding who's going to pay for it.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. Good job. Yes, great. I totally agree with all that. So last call on this poll question. I'm going to close it in 3, 2, 1. 36% of you say yes, you use several apps, 18% one app, and 45% don't use any apps yet. Very interesting. All right, Heather, go ahead.
Okay, great. So first what I wanted to do is go through and talk about, how do apps work anyway? How do they communicate? Apps can communicate in different ways. We're also going to talk about how we connect apps to QuickBooks Desktop, how we connect apps to QuickBooks Online, and then what types of data can be exchanged. And then we're going to talk a little bit about our utility apps. And really talking about what data can be exchanged is going to guide you when you're thinking about how can an app really enhance your client's workflow. So I love this. I absolutely love this this image. The only thing that it's missing, I just realized, is I don't have my little I usually have a little QuickBooks icon right there in the middle, and somehow it didn't get copied over. So typically we have QuickBooks in the middle. That's that's the core accounting program, right, for our clients. And with the ecosystem, with the APIs that Intuit, the open APIs that Intuit has, we have these developers that are best in class in what they do that can connect their apps to QuickBooks to really supercharge it and make our lives easier and make our clients' lives easier. So let's talk a little bit first on how apps can communicate with QuickBooks. So here we're looking at, these are the different ways that apps can communicate with QuickBooks. A couple of things we need to consider is what direction are they communicating? Whenever we are working with an app, we need to fully understand how is that app going to be communicating with QuickBooks. And it could be one directional, meaning that the app is going to send the data over to QuickBooks and it's just going to write that data over and record transactions that way. It could also just retrieve information from QuickBooks. So an example of that could be a reporting app, right, like QVinci, where all it's doing is it's going out and it's grabbing the data out of QuickBooks, pulling it into the app interface where you can then manipulate it inside the app, but it's never pushing data back into QuickBooks, right? It's just pulling it out. An example of an app that would just send data to QuickBooks could be like an e-commerce app like Unify, or Stitch Labs is another one where it would take data from one app and then push it through to QuickBooks, but it's never pulling the data back out of QuickBooks, right, and updating it. And then you have apps that actually pull data both ways. So an app that it can actually extract data from QuickBooks, and then it's also going to send back data to QuickBooks. And that can happen, a couple of ways. Like, for example, if you think about T-Sheets, T-Sheets is bidirectional. When you connect T-Sheets to QuickBooks, it first has to pull out the data that it needs out of QuickBooks in order for your employees and your staff members to start tracking time. So it pulls out lists, right? It pulls out your customer list, your employee list, your vendor list if you need it, but it's pulling out information out of QuickBooks. Then you're using that information, right? It's making a one-time connection, pulling that information to T-Sheets. Then you're using that information to record the time, and then you sync it back to QuickBooks, okay? So the other thing is the processes. What is the process that's happening? The process is, is it reading? Is it writing? Then we talk about the connection. There's a couple of different ways that apps can connect. I was just talking about T-Sheets, and when T-Sheets pulls the information from QuickBooks, that's a sync, and it will go through and it will pull that information from QuickBooks when you ask it to, right? But it's going to push the time data to QuickBooks automatically. So that's two ways that an app can actually connect to QuickBooks. One way is it'll listen for it, right? So it has technology inside the app that will tell the app to basically listen for things to happen inside of QuickBooks. And then if those things happen, it will actually cause an exchange of data. Then other apps are on demand, right? So if I want to pull the data, I'm going to push a button, and at that point, I'm going to extract the data. Okay, so you can have a direct connection, and then another way that you can have apps is you can have what I call utility apps or intermediary apps that are basically bridges from one app to QuickBooks. So in between, an app like that might be like Transaction Pro Importer. It could be Z-Access, which is those are connector apps. So those basically take data and basically they connect Excel to QuickBooks, right? So so that's another way that data is communicated between apps. So let's talk a little bit now about the differences between how apps connect to QuickBooks Desktop and how apps connect to QuickBooks Online. And we're not going to spend a lot of time here. You can find a wealth of information about the different APIs and the way that developers are able to access QuickBooks Desktop and QuickBooks Online at the Intuit developer website. You can even sign up for a developer account and get access to additional resources if you're really interested in that. Most of us aren't going to be interested in that, but some people, it's very helpful. They have, you can find resources such as, the API reference. So you can actually see what fields different developers can access, and that can help you when you're thinking about setting up an app for a client. So with the QuickBooks Desktop, we have the QuickBooks Desktop SDK, which is a software development kit. Okay, we also have, and what that allows you to do is that software development kit, that allows a developer to write an app that will actually be locally installed on your desktop. And that app is able to directly connect to QuickBooks to communicate with it, right? So with QuickBooks Desktop, and I'll show you in a minute. We'll go right into Desktop, and I'll show you what that actually looks like. You're actually downloading something right onto your desktop environment. We also have the QuickBooks Web Connector, and the QuickBooks Web Connector is a utility that's built into QuickBooks Desktop that allows QuickBooks Desktop to connect to apps that are in the cloud. So we'll take a look at that as well. And then finally, we're going to talk about IAF files. And IAF files are special proprietary files that Intuit created. It's a file type that can import data directly into QuickBooks. Now, IAF files can be a little risky because when you're importing IAF files, there's no verification check. So if I have an IAF file that has corrupt data in it, there's no way for QuickBooks to look at that data and identify if there's any errors. And so you can actually damage a QuickBooks Desktop file by importing IAF files. So you do want to be a little bit careful with that. And really, I prefer to either have a direct connection that's built by an app, by an app developer that uses that SDK, or using the QuickBooks Web Connector. I get a little nervous using those IAF files, and I typically like to use something that has a little more, verification and safety in there. So in QuickBooks Desktop, and we'll go ahead and go on in, when we're first connecting an app to QuickBooks Desktop, we would actually start that process from the app. And I actually meant to have my Excel open so I could show you this. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to connect an app to QuickBooks Desktop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually use CData, which is a Excel add-in, and I'm going to connect it to a sample company in QuickBooks Desktop. So what I've done is I've opened Excel, and from here I'm going to come right on over and I'm going to open up the CData tab in Excel. So this is where, once I've installed CData, which is a local program that runs locally on my computer, I see the CData tab inside Excel. It's an add-in. I'm going to click on From QuickBooks, and then it's going to prompt me to connect to the QuickBooks company. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and what it's going to do is it's going to launch, it's going to go out and start talking to QuickBooks. And see right here, that's flashing. It's telling me, hey, it just sent a little notice to QuickBooks that I want to connect to it. I'm going to click into QuickBooks, and it's going to show me this application certificate screen. And from here, I'm going to go ahead and I have a couple of options here. I can say, hey, I don't want to connect, which doesn't make a lot of sense. I can also choose to prompt each time. I can connect whenever the QuickBooks company file is open, and I can say, hey, anytime, I want you to be able to get into this QuickBooks company, even if QuickBooks isn't running. Okay, I'm okay with that. And so where this could be really useful to me is, say I have something fancy going on in Excel, like a script, that I want it to do something really, really complicated. I want it to take data out of QuickBooks, and then I want it to manipulate it somehow. And I don't really want to have QuickBooks open when I do that, then I could choose that option. Once I select my option here, and the other thing I want to note about this is when you are implementing an app that integrates with QuickBooks Desktop, and you're connecting it this way, the app will tell you which option you should choose, because each developer will have a different way to connect to QuickBooks Desktop. So you want to make sure that you're reading the implementation instructions to figure out which option you should choose here. I'm going to go ahead and click Continue, and it's going to say, hey, you've chosen to grant the application access to this QuickBooks company file, and I'm going to go ahead and click Done. Once I've done that, it's now connected, and I would be able to extract the data out of QuickBooks Desktop. Okay? To manage the connections in QuickBooks Desktop, we can actually do that from the Preferences screen in Desktop. So if I click on Edit and I go down here to Preferences, and I click on Integrated Applications right over here on the left, and then I click on Company Preferences, this is where it shows me all of the apps that are connected to this particular QuickBooks Desktop company. And every QuickBooks Desktop company is different, because what we have here is we have a database. So each database has its own permission. So if I were to log into another QuickBooks company, it would have its own set of apps that were connected to it. So from here, I can remove, I can reauthorize, and I can also view the properties of the app. Okay. The other way that I can connect apps to QuickBooks Desktop is I can do it through the Web Connector. And to view the Web Connector, and it's installed automatically when you install QuickBooks Desktop, is I can go to the File menu and then click Update Web Services, and that launches the web connector. In fact, you may have seen this launch automatically on your machine if you've connected an app already. From here, you can view the logs, you can troubleshoot, there's some help menus, and you can add an application. Again, whenever I'm connecting an app to desktop, I'm going to make sure that I fully understand the developer's process before I do that connection so that I know what to expect. Okay? Finally, the third way that we talked about was those IAF files. And the IAF files, to import an IAF file, and you can only import it, right? It's not really a direct connection. I'm just importing it. You find that under the utilities. So I would go to File, Utilities, and then Import IAF files right here. Once I've done that, I would be able to I would go ahead and browse for the IAF file, and I'd click Open, and it would just pull that data in. There's no verification process. There's no way, it's not going to look at the data if I'm missing fields or missing information, or if it's a duplicate. There's no way for QuickBooks to find that for me. So just be careful when you're using those IAF files.
Heather, and yeah, one thing I'd like to just comment on that, because I totally agree with the, you have to be careful because it's not verifying the data or anything. And I think that's one reason why the apps work better, integrate better, and cause less problems with QuickBooks Online as opposed to desktop. So I think that's a huge kind of difference there.
Absolutely.
Do you want to launch another poll question, or do you want to keep going?
Sure. How many? We've done 3 poll questions.
Well, so one of the poll questions I closed too quickly. I apologize. I got click happy. So today we will actually be having 4 poll questions. So we can keep going a little longer. You need to answer 3 to be eligible for CPE. So we can keep going.
Okay. Why don't we do one in about 5 minutes? I'm going to go through and I'm going to wrap up the QuickBooks Desktop portion, and then we're going to go ahead and talk about the QuickBooks Online portion. So let me go ahead and close that out. We've connected the server automatically. Okay, so with QuickBooks Online, we have 2 different APIs that developers can use. One is the accounting API, and that's the API. And by the way, if you don't know that term API, what it stands for, it's an acronym for Application Programming Interface, which basically means that Intuit has created a dashboard that makes it easy for developers to code. So there's little buttons that make sense to them. It's, tells them whether it's reading or writing or where they're connecting to particular data points. So it's basically an interface, right, that helps them to program their app. So we have the accounting API and we have the payments API. When you're using those API, developers can control and modify resources. So resources are things like lists, right? So resources are customer list, your vendor list, employees, any type of list data that you're going to find in QBO. Operations are things that happen like transactions, okay? So those could be, create a new invoice, create a bill payment, that type of thing. So those are making things happen are the operations. And then finally, they also have access to the settings in QuickBooks Online, okay? So that is the QuickBooks Online API. And one of the big differences that Michelle just brought up is that with the QuickBooks Online API, there are diagnostics. There are safeguards to make sure that developers can only access certain data, that when they're pushing data through, it has to be formatted a very specific way to make sure that it's secure, that it makes sense, that it's in the correct format. Before the app can even connect to QuickBooks, it has to be in the correct format or it won't allow the app to connect. So that is a big advantage over the desktop API because when you're importing the IAF and even using some of that SDK, although there are some safeguards there, it's not as robust as what we find in the QuickBooks Online API. Okay. Now, what you can do, and I'm just going to head on out to a browser, is if you go to developer, helps if I spell it right, .intuit.com. This is where you can view information about both the desktop API, the payment API, and the QuickBooks Online API. So if you want to, and I'll go ahead and copy and paste this into the chat window so that you guys can just click on it. And let me go ahead and put that in there.
That URL was on the slide too for people.
Right. Absolutely. So I'm gonna put it in the chat window too. So maybe overkill. So yeah. So we have This is a developer website, and you can come in here and you can look at the API docs and tools. So there's an API reference guide, there's code samples, there's sandbox. So the sandbox is basically test data so that when developers are building out their application, they're able to access actual transactions and different data in that sample company. So there's a wealth of information here. If you're going out to the API reference, here you can find out, what you can do in QuickBooks Online, what the apps can actually access, what fields, what transactions, what kind of operations can they do, what kind of settings can they control. So lots and lots of information there, much more information than what we're able to cover in today's webinar. But I do want you guys to know about this great resource because it's here and it's open to everybody. So definitely check that out. And Hector was sharing that, the desktop API can even duplicate customer event items and accounts. It is a big issue. So that QuickBooks Online API is definitely more robust and has much more safeguards. So, all right. And as I mentioned before, the QuickBooks Online API is an open API, which means that anybody with a developer account can write an app that connects to QuickBooks. But it's important to note that no app can connect to QuickBooks Online without authorization from the user, and an admin user has to authorize it. And QuickBooks Online uses OAuth authentication, and that means that when the app tries to connect to QuickBooks, the connection is made and a key is produced. Okay, and so what happens is you authorize it by putting your username and password and clicking a button that says authorize. When that happens, QuickBooks creates a key and grants the access, it grants the connection. And it creates a new key every time QuickBooks connects to, or the app connects to QuickBooks, which is really important because it's actually keeping a log of every time there's a connection made to QBO, which I think is really, really, really important. So that's just a real quick down and dirty explanation of both the desktop API and the QuickBooks Online API. And we'll go ahead and do another poll, and then we're going to dive into what data can be shared. So this poll is: are you certified in any apps? So lots of apps have a certification. T-Sheets has a T-Sheets Pro certification. HubDoc has a certification. In fact, HubDoc has an advanced certification. So if that's an app that you're using, you can actually take certification programs which do two things. Number one, they help you to become educated on the app. So, did the poll somehow got closed? Michelle, is there a way to reopen it?
No. No. I'll just have to put another one in there.
Okay, thanks. All right. So we'll.
I didn't click on that one.
That's so funny. Yeah. No, I opened it and then it just went away. Maybe I accidentally clicked on it.
I will put another poll in there. So go ahead and keep going for now.
Okay. Do you want me to launch the second poll? This last poll?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that, and I won't touch it. Okay. All right. Thanks everybody for letting us know about that. All right. So. So you can get your certifications in with some of these apps. So, and what it does is it helps you to educate yourself, right, on how to use the app. And once you get that certification, it kind of sets you apart from your peers, right? So if somebody is looking for a pro advisor that knows, HubDoc or T-Sheets, and you're certified in it, you're more likely to get that lead, right? Because they know that you took the time to educate yourself about the app and to complete that certification process. So I think that's a really great way for you to distinguish yourself, as a pro advisor by getting certified in some of these apps. And I'm certified in HubDoc. I'm actually advanced certified in HubDoc. And I've done some certifications. I'm not a T-Sheet Pro yet. I would like to be. That's something I haven't done. Michelle, are you a T-Sheets Pro?
Yes, I am actually.
You are.
And so, can I just answer a question while
sure.
we get this pull up? So Laura made a comment here or a question. Most pro advisors are not admin users on QBO, so we can't connect the app for the customer. So so I was typing the answer in. It's just easier to answer it verbally. You can have multiple admin users in QBO. So yes, we as the accounting professional can set up apps for our clients. It depends on what team what your user permissions are based on the team in the firm. So if you set up the firm and you have firm master admin permissions, then you'll be able to access the client apps, but your team members may not be able to access and set up the client apps.
That's right. That's right. So, and the apps tab it just got introduced in the last couple of months. And Michelle's right. So only the master admin of the QBOA firm. So when you create a new QBOA realm or firm, the person or the email that creates that QBOA firm is the master admin. Anybody that's invited into that firm is just a team member, and team members can't add apps to the client accounts through QuickBooks Online Accountant. I will say that team members can add apps to their client companies just by going directly out to the app website and connecting to the app there. But that's not going to be around forever. I'll tell you right now that that's changing because there's a new OAuth version 2 that's being introduced, and they're really tightening down that access. So if you've been doing that, and I know I've done it for some clients where I'm the team member, you can do it now, but eventually you're not going to be able to do that anymore. So while we're doing it, let's go ahead and close out this poll. We're at 90%. I'll go right into a QBOA firm and show you what that apps tab looks like. So I am in a QBOA firm. If I click on the apps tab right over here, you're going to see that I have a find apps, a client apps, and a firm apps. Now, any team member and the master admin who have full access rights, administrative rights for QuickBooks Online Accountant are able to add apps to the firm. And by the firm, we're talking about the Your Books section right down here, which is the free QBO Plus company that you get when you sign up for QuickBooks Online Accountant. So if you have team members that have, basic or custom permissions, they're not going to see a firm apps either. In fact, they won't even see an apps tab. They won't have one. But if you have team members that are, that have full access, they will have a firm apps, but they won't have the client apps right here. Only the master admin of the QBOA firm has a client apps tab. So if you were the master admin, and a best practice for firms is that you have one person, right? You have one email that signs up new QuickBooks Online companies for your clients, and that same master admin is the control account that would connect apps to their client companies. So typically that's not somebody who's going to be logging in and doing work as that user. That user is typically used only for admin purposes, to create new QBO companies, to add new team members, to connect apps. And that's just a best practice. So, and it also simplifies things, right, Michelle? Because you should have one email address where all of your clients are being invited to QBO, right?
Yes, yeah, that's the best practice for firms.
Absolutely. So to find an app, you just click on the client apps, you click and find apps, and then we would go ahead and maybe just click on, let's see, we'll click on HubDoc, and then I would go ahead and click Get App Now, and then I can either install for my firm, or I could install for my client, and I would just click down here to install for the client. Now, I don't have a client in here that I can install it for, but if I did, I would be able to select the client, and then I click Install, and that would connect the app to the client's company. And it's really that easy. I mean, installing an app for QBO is typically really straightforward to get it connected. Now, the setup part, it varies by app, right? Some apps take a little bit longer to get, to set up than others, but the connecting part is usually pretty easy, okay? So that's how you're going to add an app for a client. And it's the same process for the firm. You just select the box to connect to your firm. Do you have anything to add to that, Michelle?
No, sorry, I was typing some answers here.
All right. Okay, so now that we kind of understand how apps can connect to QuickBooks, let's talk about how the data flows between QuickBooks and the app. We talked about this a little bit already. So it's important to understand how the data is flowing between QuickBooks and the app. So when you're researching an app for a client or you're looking at an app, you're going to need to know that. Is it going to be extracting data from QuickBooks into the app and you're going to work with it there, or is it going to be pushing data into QuickBooks? So you need to kind of look at that. And I actually pulled this graphic right off that developer.intuit website. So there's lots and lots of resources there for you. But I really like this graphic because it shows you, from the customer, we have the money in transactions. So these are all the types of transactions that we can access. And we have money out transactions over here for our vendors. And then we have the journal entry and the transfer. So just a nice little graphic to show how what types of data and what types of transactions and things can be exchanged. Also, I'm just going to notate this. Intuit is building a brand new API. It's API 4 is what they're calling it, and it is going to have actually more access, or give developers access to more areas of QuickBooks Online than we previously had. So that's going to be really exciting because, for some apps, if you use an apps a lot, you found that there's certain areas of QuickBooks Online that you really wanted the app to have access to, and it couldn't get in there, like payroll and sales tax. With the new API 4, there's going to be more areas that developers will have access to, which will give us additional functionality in our apps, which is going to be really nice. All right, utility apps. I kind of mentioned those. I mentioned those a little bit earlier. Utility are apps that connect other apps or manipulate data. So I have a few listed here. One of my absolute favorite apps is Zapier. Zapier is a connector app. It's web-based, completely web-based, and it doesn't only just work with QuickBooks. But what it does is it allows you to take data from one app, and if something happens, then it does something else in another app. And there's other apps like Zapier, like there's If Then, or If This Then That, which is IFTTT, does kind of the same thing. And basically what it's doing is it's looking for a trigger. It actually monitors your app and looks for a trigger. So for example, if I wanted to create an email every time a new customer was added to my QuickBooks company, I could make the trigger that a new customer is saved to QuickBooks. And what Zapier will do is it will listen to QuickBooks. So I'll make the connection. I'll connect Zapier to QuickBooks, and then it will listen. And if a new customer is added, it will actually do something. It'll create an action. So the action in that case would be create an email. So what I would do is I would create a Zap that connects to QuickBooks Online. I would say, hey, I want you to listen, and when a new customer is added, I want you to connect to my Gmail account and create an email. And then I can put in a template for what I want that email to say, and I can connect different fields in QuickBooks and insert them into the body of that app. So there's lots of different ways that you can use Zapier to automate different workflows. So if you may have attended my session at QuickBooks Connect, I did a Zapier class. I taught 5 Zaps that you could use. And one of them was a W-9 collection system, which was if you add a new vendor in QuickBooks Online and you check the box that they're subject to 1099, it would generate an email automatically to the vendor to collect a W-9. So that was one example. Other ways that you can do it is you can connect Google Calendar to Trello. If you ever use Trello, which is kind of a to-do list app, web-based. What I did, the Zap that I created for that was in Google Calendar, my trigger was a new event, and I filtered it to say if the event had in the name to do, I wanted it to zap a new card to Trello as a to-do item for myself. So you can do lots of things. You can automate if you write blog entries on a WordPress website, you can automate posts. Once you save that blog post, it'll automatically post it to LinkedIn or Facebook. But what I love about these connector apps is if you can't find a native integration between 2 apps that you love and that you're working in, a lot of times you can build the custom integration using an app like Zapier that'll do it for you, and you can really drill down. I've even used Zapier for apps that do have a native integration, but the integration didn't do what I wanted it to do. It wasn't pulling the right data. The integration didn't have, it wouldn't send the data that I wanted out of QuickBooks, but Zapier would. It allowed me to actually build it. So love Zapier. Just to plug my workshop, I'm doing a 5-week Zapier workshop where we're going to be going through and actually creating different workflows and workshopping together to really master Zapier and learn how we can use it both for ourselves and for our clients. And that's actually going to start tomorrow. So we'll talk more about that later. Other ones, we have the QODBC, which basically connects QuickBooks, either desktop, and you can get this in the online edition or in QuickBooks Desktop. It'll connect to the database and allows you to pull the data into, right out of QuickBooks and into into SQL, you can pull it into Excel, and you can manipulate the data there. And then there's a couple others there. There's C Data, Z Access, or Z Systems, and TPI. All right, so we've talked about the utility apps, and I love utility apps. In fact, Michelle and I are talking about doing an apps power hour just on utility apps in the future. When you're thinking about implementing apps for your clients, it's really important to understand and define the process first. So when you're thinking about, an app that you want to implement an app either in your practice or with a client, first, typically, there's a problem, right? You have a client that says, you know what, I really wish I didn't have to spend so much time doing this, or I really wish that, there was an easier way to complete this particular task in my company. And that's indicating that there's an issue, right? So when you're thinking that maybe an app is a good solution, you need to define that process first. I think it's easy for us. There's lots of bright and shiny new things, and I'm totally guilty of this sometimes, where I just hear about something great and I run out, I'm like, oh my God, that's so great. I'm just going to implement it for everybody. But it's not the right app for my client because it doesn't fit the process, which is why I say it's super important just to go through and define the process first. So in this, I made this super simple. This process we're looking at here it's our review process, right, for our clients. We collect our data from our clients, we process their data in QuickBooks, we review it, we create reports, and then we consult with them, and then we rinse and repeat the next month, right? So that's the process. So if we wanted to streamline this, the first thing we need to do is to look for the bottleneck. Where is the bottleneck in that process? And for 65% of accounting professionals, and actually not even 65%, I actually misspoke on that. Intuit did a study and they found that 65% of our time is getting data from our clients. Isn't that crazy? 65%. Like, that's nuts that, we spend more time getting information from our clients than we actually do accounting. So it's really, that is a big bottleneck for us. We call our clients, we say, send us bank statements. We tell them to, give us other information, and, they either drag their feet or they send it to us in the wrong format. Either way, we just spend so much time getting that information from them. So that's a real pain point for us. So in this particular process, right off the bat, there's our bottleneck. We can't start our work because we've got to get all that stuff, okay? So once we decide where the bottleneck is, then we know what type of app we need to look for. So in this case, we need a way to get all our information from our clients really fast and easy. So before you implement an app, you want to look at, what are you using now? And is what you're using now, is it efficient? Do you like the user experience? So for example, if we're looking for a way to collect client documents, and we're using Gmail and ShareFile and all these other things, we want to evaluate, what do we already have? And we need to kind of inventory that, because when we look for the app, we need to make sure that the new app that we might use is going to work with these other things that we already have, existing in our workflow. So is it efficient? Do you like the user experience? How difficult would it be to change? And does it offer integration with other apps? So those are things that you want to think about in current apps that you're using before you even start to think about introducing or looking for a new app. And that's going to help to guide you. If it's an awesome app and you are super happy with it, that's an app you want to keep, right? But if there's an app that you're like, it's not so great, then that's something that where if you had to replace it with something else, that would be okay. So just think about those things. When you're selecting apps, best practices, first thing, and this is probably the most important, well, one of the most important things, is always choose apps that are listed on apps.com, because those are the only ones that have gone through Intuit's vetting process, where they go through and make sure that the app meets specific guidelines, that the security requirements are met, that it functions the way it says it's going to function, that it does what it says it does. They go through a pretty intense vetting process to make sure that those apps are reliable and that they're secure. So lots, it's an open API, so I could go write an app today and start selling it, right? So, if I'm not on apps.com, Intuit's never looked at my app. So really important to make sure you do that. Does it solve the must-haves? So when you're thinking about implementing an app, and I always do this, and I'm going to show you kind of a template of the worksheet that I use in my practice, is I figure out, what does the app have to do for the client? And I'll talk to the client. I meet with the client, I spend time with them, I talk to staff members that are going to be using the app to figure out exactly what do they have to have in this app. or it's a deal breaker. If it doesn't have it, it's a deal breaker. So we define the must-haves, then we define the nice-to-haves. So it would be really nice if this app had a mobile version, but it's not totally necessary. Or it would be really nice if this app had a pretty interface or whatever. In one app, I was doing a workflow search for a client, and they had, they really wanted a Gantt chart. It wasn't a must-have, but it was a really nice to have, and the app that won had a Gantt chart. So things like that. Read the reviews. Is it a ProAdvisor pick? When you're on apps.com, let me go on out to apps.com here, or actually right there, I could have showed you right here. Whenever you see this little green trophy right there, that means that that's a ProAdvisor pick, that a ProAdvisor has put their stamp of approval on saying that's a good app, I would recommend that to somebody else. So that is really important. Read reviews. Speak to developers and other ProAdvisors. Talk to the developer. Talk to your peers. Go on out to the Facebook group, the QuickBooks Power, and ask about it. People will, whenever I do that, I get responses right away, and I get a lot of responses. So that's a really great resource for you when you're vetting an app for you or your clients. And then finally, test the app. Ask for a demo or start a free trial. And I typically do both. I'll ask for a demo just to see, to talk to the developer and kind of see how it works, and then I'll do a trial. Don't ever connect the trial to a live company. This is less important if you're just, using like a reporting app or just pulling information from QuickBooks. But if you're ever writing information to QuickBooks, don't connect to a live company. You can create a sample company. So create a trial, a 30-day trial at QuickBooks.intuit.com. And then you can even use a desktop sample company, and you can import, convert that to the sample company or the trial that you created and get some test data in there. Another thing that I do is I keep Excel spreadsheets of different transactions so I can really quickly create test data in a new QBO company just to test apps. So you can do that as well. Once you have found apps, you can go on out to apps.com like I showed you, and you can search apps.com for different, in different ways. So one way you could do it is you could just look for something. So you could just type in time tracking, and it would give you a list of all the time tracking apps. You can also browse by category. So if I come over here, I can browse by category like AP, payroll, data security backup, e-commerce. I can search for apps that way. So I'm going to go through, and I'm going to go through apps.com, and I'm going to look for different apps, and I'm usually going to find several that are in the same app category, right? And I'm going to want to look at a few of them, okay? So I'll look at a few of them, and I'll go through, and I will create an Excel spreadsheet. This is how I do it. And I put the app name right over here on the left-hand side, app 1, 2, 3, maybe I have 10, who knows. And then I put in my must-haves. Okay, so I'll have a column for each must-have, and then I'll have a column for each nice-to-have. And then I grade them on certain things like ease of use, ease of implementation, and maybe there's something else. Price could be a big factor, right? So how much does it cost? Is it super expensive? I always talk to my client about their budget first, right? So what is the budget? And then that would be maybe a column in there. And I'll put in, a yes, no for the columns for the must-haves, nice-to-haves. And then for the ease of use and ease of implementation, I'll actually use a grading scale. And I do that so that I can kind of come up with a value for that app. So yes maybe is worth, if it's on a scale of 1 to 5, yes is 5, 1 is 0, and then ease of use should be like, 1 through 5. And then I'll finally have a column over here where I'll actually do a little calculation, and then I'll identify the apps in the spreadsheet that have the highest score. And those are the apps that I'll actually go through, and I'll watch a demo, and I'll actually test them out. So that's the way that I do it. That's my method for comparing apps to narrow my choices. Once I've actually, decided on a few apps and I've tested them, that's when I'll bring the client in and I'll show them what their options are. And I typically will narrow it down to about 3 choices. Unless there's less than that, I'll narrow it down to about 3 choices. I'll bring them in for a demo, and I'll explain the pros and cons that I found, and then we'll decide together what the right solution is. So
Heather,
Yeah,
I'm going to go ahead and launch the next poll question because I know
perfect. Okay.
we usually have some people that do have to get off at the top of the
Okay,
hour.
great.
But
Okay.
those of you that can hang around for a few more minutes, Heather and I, we do have more material for Heather to cover. She's getting ready to talk about how you can actually back up QuickBooks Online. So don't leave if you can stick around. We still have some great information. Those of you that do have to jump off, finish this poll question. We appreciate you for joining us and hope to see you on the QB Power Hours coming up in January. And don't forget Heather and Hector's webinars on Friday. You've got that in the slides, and people are asking where they could get the handouts. In the GoToWebinar toolbar, there's a little thing that says handouts. Right there, you can get the PDF of the handouts. So that is available to you as well. Okay, and I'm great, Heather. 49% so far have said yes, they learned lots, and 50% said yes,
Oh, great.
some. So you got
Awesome.
a lot of people learning great information from you. So
Excellent.
awesome. So those of you that need those poll questions, please go ahead and answer this poll question. We're going to give you a few more seconds on that. So if you need it, please answer the poll question now. I'm going to close it in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and done. Very good. All right,
All
Heather.
right. I had a quick question. So Leslie asked me, hey, Heather, do you charge for your learning curve on which app works for a client? So Leslie, I told you that I love apps. I spend a lot of time looking at apps. So I actually offer app selection as a service to my client. I do a lot of apps consulting. So I actually will go through and vet it. And then if I'm going to be using the app, it depends. If it's something that I feel like I can be up and running easily, then yeah, I'm going to charge for that. But I charge just to go through and evaluate the apps for the client. I absolutely charge for that. And of course, I always get paid up front. All right, steps to implementing an app. So once we've decided that we're going to do an app, here's some best practices. Consider your timing. Is it a good time for you to introduce something new into the client's workflow? Is a key player going on maternity leave? Is it off season for that client? So right now, I do work with some landscapers, and right now it's off season for them. So this is a great time for us to change processes. I would never want to do that in the middle of the summer because they're usually pretty busy. How much time is needed to implement and train? You need to know that. And one thing that I'll add to what I was saying to Leslie is, if it's a big project, I will look for somebody who knows that app really well, and I will bring them on board to work with me on the implementation. So if it's an app that I'm not familiar with, or it's a really big job, or there's somebody that I know is a total expert in that app implementation, I want them on my team because I want to create the best possible experience for my client. And you know what? I'm probably going to learn a little bit. So if I do that, I'm typically, the only time I would charge for that service would be if I'm the project manager. And a lot of times I am the project manager. So I'm the person that's actually coordinating all the moving pieces in the implementation, even if I'm not actually doing the implementation. Execution, who's going to drive the implementation process? Is that you? Is that going to be the app developer? Is it going to be somebody else? Make sure you have a point person at the client that's going to take ownership of this. So they're going to be the person that's going to be scheduling, coordinating everyone else in the organization, in the client's organization, and be your point person. Expect hiccups and allow time for them. Stuff's gonna go wrong. It just does. There's always a hiccup, so make sure that you allow yourself your time and that your time, your timeline isn't so tight that if something does happen, it's going to push you way over a really important milestone. Understand support options and use them. So, and I have to remind myself to do this. So I have a rule. I have a 10-minute rule. If I'm doing something and trying to do an implementation and I hit 10 minutes, I ask for help. I reach out to the developer. I stop trying to figure it out on my own, and I look for somebody who can help me. Get everybody on board. Don't try to implement anything with a client who is resistant to implementing it because they will not adopt it. I mean, once in a while they'll, but really they need to say to you, I want to do this. I'm ready to do this. I want to do this. If you have a client going, I don't know, I'm not ready, I can't do this, then implementing the app is not going to be successful because they're not ready for it. So keep that in mind. And it takes a little bit, as accountants, we have a little bit of psychology that we have to, have with our clients, right? So know that client. And then set milestone dates. So set the milestone dates. What that's going to do for you, it's going to help to keep you on track, and it's also a way that you communicate with your client. So if you're going to be going over and you're looking ahead to a week and you're like, hey, I'm not going to meet that milestone, you can reach out to them and say, hey, you know, we're going to adjust a little bit. But having those milestones predefined on a calendar is extremely helpful when implementing an app. Apps to back up QuickBooks Online. So it used to be that, you know, you didn't want to test anything you didn't want to test anything with the QuickBooks Online company. And also, if you implemented the app and something went wrong, you're in big trouble. Well, now we have apps that we can use to back up QBO. And there's 2 now on apps.com, and there's 2 more that are coming. So Backup Circle, I have not used. But it does, you know, it does a backup. It actually backs up the data and you can restore it. So typically the way these apps work is they continuously back up. So you can actually restore back to a specific day and time. So say I implement an app and I know that I implemented the app at 10 o'clock yesterday and something went horribly wrong. I can actually go back and restore to 10 o'clock yesterday using one of these apps. So definitely check those out. There is a fee. Chronobooks is also a great app. It also backs up. I have tested that and I do like it a lot. You can also use this to back up and restore into a new QBO company if you wanted to do that as well. So definitely check those out. And I would love to do on our Apps Power Hour session on these new backup apps that are coming out. There's 2 more that are there was one called Safety Net, and somebody just bought Safety Net. It isn't listed on apps.com yet, so I don't think that it's actually ready for market yet, but it's coming back out. So if you were a Safety Net user, they just got bought by somebody. And then there's one called Rewind, which is actually a backup software that backs up different other types of apps, and they're actually adding QBO to their offerings. So you can check that out as well. So that's a best practice. If you want to back up your data before you're doing an implementation, especially if you're importing data from the app into QuickBooks. Okay, so implementing that, connecting the app, you want to sign up for the app at the developer's website. Now you can do that through apps.com too. Complete the required setup based on their guidelines and then connect the app to QuickBooks. So those are going to be your steps, pretty easy. And finally, I just want to point out that if you're implementing multiple apps, you could have multiple problems. So make sure you're defining that workflow first. Map out the flow of information. If you are implementing an inventory app, a e-commerce app, and then some, shopping cart apps that are going to do your credit card processing, you probably don't want to connect all those apps to QuickBooks because you're going to end up with duplication of data. So you need to map out, how does that data flow? Does the merchant processing go into the inventory app? Does it go to the e-commerce app? You've got to figure all that out before you connect to QuickBooks. And that actually ties in with app stacking. And we're going to do our next session on the 25th of January. It's going to be all about app stacking and how you actually figure out what the entry point into QuickBooks is when you're implementing multiple apps into QBO. Identify the apps, ensure they're going to work together, and then implement a complex app engagement in phases. Don't try to do it all at once. So if you have 5 apps you're implementing with a client, don't do it all at once. Pick one, get them used to it, grab another, and do it gradually. That way your client will have the best experience. All right. So that, lot of information, right?
And you know what?
A lot of information.
Heather, I just love this because we have so many people that are asking so many questions. I'm typing furiously trying to keep up with them all.
I can see you.
Yeah, but I want to let you all know this was the intro webinar, Intro to Apps, for our Apps Power Hour. Heather and I are going to be going over a lot more details. We're going to be comparing some apps, like let's say get 2 or 3 invoicing apps, comparing them to one another, getting more in depth on apps throughout the year. So I hope you guys will keep joining us for these things. Remember Friday, Hector's got his video marketing webinar, and then Heather also is doing the Zapier 5-week workshop. That's going to be kind of a great masterclass for those of you that want to get in depth on that. And then our next Power Hour will be January 11th with a desktop payroll deep dive. So we'd love to have you join us for that. Heather, do you want to see if there's any questions that you wanted to answer quick?
Sure. Let's see. Let me go through and just kind of take a peek. Do you have any, while I'm doing that, you want to just...
Somebody here is saying, is there a way for us to see the log of an app's access to QBO? In the audit log of QuickBooks Online, it will show you when third-party apps import things and stuff like that. So you can see that in the audit log. And Hector said
Yeah, absolutely.
Hector's webinar Friday is free and it will not be recorded. So if you guys want to join that, you better make sure that you join that. Zapier workshop link is not working.
Okay. Let me test. I'm going to test it real quick. It should be working.
And Jenna,
okay, so the link is working. If the coupon is not working, that may be what she means, is the coupon may not be working. And I think I will check that. So if you are unable to redeem the coupon, give me 5 minutes and I will go ahead and enter in that coupon code.
Yeah, the coupon is not working. So,
got it. I will get that fixed in just a couple minutes. But I did click on the link and the link was working. So,
and then you can also,
at least for me.
Yeah, click on either one of those links to register. Somebody asked how to register for Hector's. Click on the link, and that will get you registered. And somebody says, how do we get on the recurring webinar series for the Apps Power Hour? We're going to go ahead and use this same, if you're registered for the QB Power Hours, we're going to be using the same system for that. So you are already registered, and we're going to talk and work with Heather, Hector, and I are all going to kind of figure out all the details on all this. But for now, if you're registered for QB Power Hours, you are registered for the Apps Power Hours. And I'm really glad to see so many people that joined us, and we're so excited about that. Feel free to join us, like Heather said. If you can go to the next slide, Heather, on the Facebook group for QB Power Hour, it is a very active group. We'd love to see you out there. Thank you again to our sponsors. They make this free for you all. T-Sheets, Arrow Workflow, and HubDoc. Those are all 3 amazing apps for accounting professionals and, for our clients like T-Sheets and stuff. But check those out as well. And then go one more. There you go, the Facebook group.
There
Make sure you join us on Facebook. It's a great place to ask about specific apps and let us know what you're interested in. As a matter of fact, Heather, maybe we could go put a poll question out there on the Facebook group. Give us a few minutes.
Oh, great.
Give us a few minutes and we'll put a poll question. And don't forget, please do those rate surveys, the Intuit average billing rate survey and the apps survey. That's going to help us, and we'll share all those results with everybody. Once the survey is closed, that'll help see, what your peers are doing and things like that. People are saying, where are the surveys? Those are in the slides, in the handouts. You've got a link to both of those. I'll also go post the links to both of those in the Facebook group, so you can have those there.
Perfect.
And Heather, go ahead.
I think I posted a link to the survey yesterday in the Facebook group.
Okay, great.
And I don't know if I did it today. If not, we'll go post it again after the webinar for sure.
All right, very good. All right, so once again, happy birthday to Hector. Glad he's got the time off, enjoying it with his family. And I wanted to say also, I hope everybody has been enjoying the holidays and some time with your family and things like that. I hope everybody has a safe and a happy new year. The next Power Hour is on January 11th. I hope you guys can join us for that one. And then the Apps Power Hour, was it the 25th, Heather? I can't remember the date.
The 25th, yes. Yeah. It'll be the 25th. Yep.
So love to have you join us for that. I think we're done for the day. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Heather, so thrilled to be kicking this off with you, and I'm so glad to have you join our Power Hour family as a regular co-host for Apps Power Hours. So I hope you guys love Heather as much as we do. She's awesome. So thank you, Heather.
Love you guys too.
Great job today. Bye, everybody. Bye, Heather.
All right. Bye, Michelle. Bye, everybody. Have a great, happy new year. See you in 2018.